Hi friends! Welcome back to a brand new bullet journal video. I'm trying something a little bit different. I'm going to be recording on my phone, but recording my audio separately, so we'll see how this turns out. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my Q2 reads. Now I'm going to be kind of recording this in different segments, I guess, because as I'm recording this right now, the month is not over. It is the 22nd of June, so I have just a little bit more time to wrap up any books that I am currently reading. So I wanted to show you this bullet journal. This is an Archer and Olive dot grid journal, and I have finished this one, and I had it in my stash of things that I use because I was still finishing my reading portion of this journal, and I'll show you what I mean here in a second. So this is my reading log that I have been using since January, and I could only fit 45 books on this spread. So in my new bullet journal that I have migrated over to, I have like another 50 books. Now my reading goal for 2024 is 50 books, and for the last 3 years I have surpassed that goal, but I keep it the same just because, you know, life happens, you never know. But right now I'm at 45 and it's halfway through the year. So who knows, I could get to 100 books by the end of the year. So this is my little bookshelf. The colors literally mean nothing. I just colored in whatever I felt like it. And then I did create this little page here and added some cute stickers. So moving on over, last video for my Q1 video, which I'll link up above, we went January to March, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I did have some April books in that video, but we didn't cover them because that is considered Q2. We are going to go over April to June, what I have now, and then I will come in at the end of the video and kind of fill you in on the books I finished by the end of the month. So I, again, have this added page because one page was not going to do it. I don't know what I was thinking. And then I had to add this little flap because I ran out of even more room. So we're going to go through each of the books and just kind of talk about them. Hello friends, so I have switched over to voiceover for better audio quality, so thank you for bearing with me in the first 3 minutes of this video. So let's go ahead and go through the list of books starting with April. I read Murder at the Mayfair Hotel by C.J. Archer, and I finished that on April 15th. So this is the first one in the series, and I loved it. I thought it was really good. We're introduced to the main character, Cleopatra Fox, and I will definitely keep on continuing with the series. So I gave this 4 stars. I loved the intro of the characters and really resonate with Cleo's personality. I didn't care too much for the murder mystery plot. However, I did enjoy Cleo building relationships with members of the hotel. Overall, a really enjoyable read, and I did listen to this on audiobook. The second book I finished that very same day is Never Leave the Dogs Behind by Brianna Medea, and this is a memoir. This is her second book. I have both of her books. Both of them are signed, and I just absolutely love her. I follow her on Instagram. Like, she is amazing and so outspoken, and that's something I truly admire. And yeah, she's great. So I gave this 5 stars. I normally don't rate memoirs or autobiographies or anything like that, but I had to because it's so good. I didn't write a blurb about it, but 5 stars. I'm keeping both my copies. Like, enough said. It's so good. In her memoir, she just talks about like short stories from her life and especially with her 4 dogs. So I definitely recommend these books. The first one had me in tears. The second one, not so much. However, the stories were wild and it's like, oh my gosh, like, did that really happen? So I definitely recommend. All right, the next book I finished again the very same day is Before We Say Goodbye. This is the same author who wrote Before the Coffee Gets Cold and the other books in that series, which I've read all of them. They are so good, so heartfelt, so sad. Like, it just brings out the human emotion. I definitely recommend this series. This one I gave 4 stars. It was one of my favorites in the series, but I think the first one holds the number one in my mind. I remember crying when I read that. This one was good. It has the same emotions and the same kind of feel as the other stories. And I wrote, I love these short stories about humanity, relationships, love, loss, guilt, shame, and more. Moving on to the next book, I was in a mood for some cozy atmosphere, cozy vibes, and I kind of went down a rabbit hole of children's books. So I listened to The House at Pooh Corner by A.A. Milne, and I was enveloped in coziness. I definitely recommend listening to the audiobook. I gave this 5 stars. I felt so cozy. This is the second book in the Winnie the Pooh series. If you just need something that's a little bit comforting, I highly recommend this book. I finished The Mystery Guest, which is the sequel to The Maid, which I absolutely loved. It was The Maid was slow, and then at the end it was like bang, bang, bang. And this book I gave 5 stars as well. I listened to it on audio. I said, I love this series so much. I listened to this one on audiobook and it was very easy to listen along to. The story was great and I definitely purchased the series. Really enjoyed it and can't wait for the next one. I highly recommend. At this point, I don't exactly remember what it was about, but I do remember it was very touching. Molly is still grieving a loss in her life and she's trying to navigate that loss. And I just really relate with her. I really relate to the main character. So I recommend this series. It's so good. It's just a great cozy murder mystery series, honestly. So highly recommend. All right, we are back on the children's book train. I finished When We Were Very Young and Now We Are 6 by A.A. Milne and Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. I finished these audiobooks both in the same day. They were relatively short and sweet. I just needed something cozy at the time, and I had never read Alice in Wonderland. It's my favorite Disney movie of all time. It's one of my favorite stories. I have the book, I just never read it. And listening to it on audio was such a trip, to be frank. I gave that 5 stars and I gave the Winnie the Pooh book 4 stars. That one wasn't really my favorite, but both were enjoyable regardless, even as an adult. So moving on to the 27th book is The Flat Share by Beth O'Leary, and one of my dearest girlfriends gifted this book to me, and I listened to it. I read part of it, listened to part on audio. I'm not gonna lie, this book was really hard to get into at first. Like, I just wasn't feeling the characters. I wasn't connecting, but as the story went on, it got really good. It did get really good. I gave it 5 stars. I said, so good, we'll definitely read again. So that means it's going to be on my keep shelf. I did enjoy this by the end of it. I connected to the characters. It's just a little bit slow for me to kind of get through, but overall the ending made it worth it. Next up is Murder in Venice. Now this is a new series that I started about Lottie. I gave this one 3.75 stars. This was a nice, short, easy listen. I like the main character. Not sure I'll continue with the series, but we'll see. I wasn't a fan of Lottie's boss. I didn't like how she treated Lottie. It's coming back to me, but I do remember the series a little bit. I listened to it on audiobook, obviously. I gave it 3. I put 3 stars, but it's 3.75. So I'm going to have to give this series a little bit more of a try, but I like the setting. It takes place in the Flapper era. It's a cozy murder mystery. Yeah, it takes place in 1923. She's a maid and she's hired by a wealthy heiress. So there's a lot of that like dynamic of the time and their roles in society and stuff like that. So I'll continue to give that one a try. I think I actually read a couple more of them, if I'm not mistaken, but yeah, we'll see. Okay, next up, I have Funny Story by Emily Henry. This is her newest release. I listened to this on audiobook. I gave it 4 stars. I said, a really great story. Some parts were slow. However, the overall story was believable and I love the characters. I really got into it and would recommend. I love real life struggles and fictional stories because it makes me feel like I'm not so alone. And these characters were definitely going through some struggles. They came together under crazy, wild circumstances and had to navigate those together. And this was my first Emily Henry read that I read, and I have her other audiobooks on hold, like I'm waiting for them to come through. I'm excited. I did enjoy this book and I do recommend it. It's just not like a, oh my gosh, I need to own it kind of a book for me personally. All right, next up, I did not give this one a rating, and this might be, don't get mad at me. This is The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. Now, I had just finished the Hunger Games series, and I love the Hunger Games series. So this one is a prequel to all of them. I'm not gonna lie to you, this book kind of put me in a reading slump. I said I'm not sure what my rating is for this one quite yet. Some parts were boring and dragged on while others were exciting and intense. I enjoyed the ending. What a wild ride. I'm glad I read this overall, which I am glad I read it overall. It gave me more context to the Hunger Games and gave me more insight to the world that the author built. I just think it wasn't for me, but I am glad I read it. Now we have Wives and Daughters. This is a classic. One of my girlfriends suggested I read this. It's her favorite book. This I was reading around the same time as The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So I had these really heavy, dense books, and I did listen to Wives and Daughters on audio book. Now, I'm not a classics girly. I feel like my fantasy self is, and I'm just not in this world. So this I gave 3.75. However, listening to it, just having it on in the background, like totally cozy vibes because it's the countryside. You get these women and relationships and cattiness, and you get a lot of things in this book. I think because it's a classic, though, it just was not for me. And moving on, we have Moonlight Road, which is a Virgin River novel. This one was pretty good. I gave it 4.5 stars. This story had me transported from the very first page. I couldn't put it down. Such a great read if you need something engaging and a palate cleanser. So great. I love these Virgin River characters. Next on the list is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and she is hands down becoming one of my favorite authors. I know this past June she had a new novel come out, which I need to get my hands on. She came out with The Dead Romantics, which I gave 5 stars. Loved that book. So The 7-Year Slip, I didn't have any expectations. I didn't know what it was about, which is kind of the fun of it. And so I wrote, hands down obsessed with the story, 10 out of 10 recommend. The beautiful details and poetic descriptions throughout the story were captivating. I love all the characters. I love everything about this book. Definitely will reread, and the ending had me crying in the best way possible. This story warmed my heart. So, yeah, another story about a main character grieving a loss and kind of slipping back in time and meets a boy, and it's just a lovely story, so well written, hands down one of my favorites of all time. All right, next on the list we have the original #1 Winnie the Pooh. I listened to on audiobook. I really enjoyed this. I gave it 5 stars. It was so cozy. I 100% recommend the audiobook. They have like background noises and sounds, and it's just so comforting. After that, we have Murder at the Piccadilly Playhouse. This is a Cleopatra Fox mystery number 2. I gave this 4 stars. Such a great listen, easy to follow along with. I like the characters and the plot. I will continue with the series. Definitely enjoying listening to those audiobooks. Next up is Last Call at the Local, and this is Love Lists and Fancy Ships book number 3. And this is an up-and-coming new author for me, Sarah Grunder Ruiz. I hope I'm saying that right. And I gave this 5 stars, and I loved the story. Totally obsessed. Totally love the characters in this book. A wonderful representation of OCD and ADHD, in my opinion. Definitely keeping to reread again. So OCD is something that I struggle with every day. It's something I'm trying to cope with. And the fact that I finally read something that I can put words to and put a language to is amazing. So I could say so much more about this book, but I'm running out of time. Definitely recommend. Next up, The Cairo Brief, a Poppy Denby Investigates series. This is the number 4 in the series. I gave this 4 stars. I love this series so much. It's fun to follow along on Poppy's adventures. Definitely recommend this cozy murder mystery. I looked on the author's website, Fiona Veach Smith, and hopefully someday in the future the series will continue, but I think I have one more left before I think the publisher just stopped publishing this story or something like that. So totally obsessed with the series. All right, next up we have Buried in Books, a bibliophile mystery. This is number 12. Now I read this series out of order. This specific copy I ended up getting at a library sale, and I'm actually really glad I picked this up because I ended up going to a used bookstore and bought some more of this series, again out of order because that's just what I do. I gave this 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed reading this story. I can't wait to continue with the series. It takes place in San Francisco, which is where I'm from. Old friends rekindle, kind of. Overall, very exciting and action-packed. I loved this. I read it pretty quickly. Yeah, in like the span of like 3 or 4 days. And I just enjoyed it so much. Next on the list is The House Across the Lake by Riley Sager. I also love this author so much. I've been trying to get through a lot of his books. I even ordered another one online, his most recent release, to get started on. And all I said was 5 stars, so good, 10 out of 10 recommend. I was engaged in the story from beginning to end and just obsessed. You never knew which way it was going to go. So I love authors like that. All right, next up is Murder in the Drawing Room, another Cleopatra Fox number 3 book. I gave this 3.75 stars. The story captured my attention at first, but as the story went on, I started to lose a little bit of interest. Overall, this series is really good to have on in the background, even if you're not fully paying attention. I'll definitely continue with the series. So typically what that means for me is like it just wasn't captivating. It wasn't anything special. However, I'm already invested in these characters that I'm going to keep going with the series unless I find myself really not having a good time. Now, this Virgin River one was not good. This is Forbidden Falls, another Virgin River novel. This was not my favorite Virgin River story for 2 reasons. 1, religion, and 2, children. Overall, it was fine, and I pushed through because I'm committed to the series. I now have context to how these 2 characters met, but overall, I definitely won't reread or re-listen to this one again. I did listen to this one on audiobook specifically, which was new for me because I typically buy this series at my used bookstore whenever I can find them, and I read them physically. I'm really glad I did not purchase this one. As someone who is not religious and doesn't really care to listen to anything about religion, this one is about like a pastor who moves to Virgin River, and he meets a lady, a woman, and she has children, and children is another trope I just don't care for at this phase in my life. So it really was just 2 things that I did not enjoy coming together. And that's not to say that it won't be for somebody else. It just wasn't the book for me. All right, next on the list is All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. I gave this 4 stars. This is an incredibly long, slow burn, and I was not prepared for it. I honestly feel some pieces could have been left out, as it is 600 pages. Now, granted, I bought this at Barnes & Noble, and it had an extra like chapter, which is fine. That's great. But yeah, this was my first read by this author, and oh my gosh, slow burn is not my thing. I did not know what I signed up for, but overall at the end of it, it was good. It was fine. I won't reread it, but it was good. It was Grumpy Sunshine, if you like that kind of a thing. Next up is I listened to Unbirthday by Liz Braswell on audio. I gave it 3 stars. It's an Alice in Wonderland retelling. This book was just all right. I didn't care for the politics in this world, but revisiting the characters from Wonderland is always fun. And I don't really have anything more to say about that. Back on the Cozy Train, I listened on audio, The Complete Tales of Peter Rabbit and Friends. I gave this 3 stars. It was cozy, but it just didn't really do it for me. But again, it was nice to have on in the background. Okay, next up is It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. I listened to this on audiobook, and this is my first Tessa Bailey novel. I ended up giving it 4 stars. The ending made this a 4-star read. I didn't really believe the romance in the beginning, although the rich girl trope isn't my thing. I did enjoy the story and the building of relationships overall. I will keep reading books from this author. And speaking of, I am currently reading Hook, Line, and Sinker by Tessa Bailey, which is number 2 in this series. So very exciting. I enjoyed it. I just don't like reading about rich people, which is funny because I'm reading Magnolia Parks as we currently speak, but it's just not my favorite. And I found it very hard to believe that this small town fisherman is enthralled by this rich girl. Like, I don't know. It's just not my thing. And if that's your thing, more power to you. It just wasn't for me. So it was really hard to believe that these 2 characters were going to come together. But at the end of the book, she gets a little bit more grounded, comes back down to earth, and that part I enjoyed. Moving on to my newest bullet journal, since I finished up all of the sections in this reading log for this bullet journal. I finished The Little Paris Bookshop by Nina George, and this was translated from French. And I think I got this at like a library sale or a used book sale. I don't really know where I got this book. However, I'm so glad I read it. I gave it 4.25 stars. The writing was just so poetic and magical. I said this would be a 5-star read if I didn't find myself a little bit bored or phrases going over my head at certain points of the story. That being said, though, the writing is absolutely gorgeous and calls out the little moments in everyday life. The writing puts words and scenarios to emotions that were stunning and relatable. Definitely recommend the book, and it is not what I was expecting. I do recommend this book. It's about a man in his 50s who has been grieving and avoiding the loss of a relationship, and then he finds out what had happened, and he goes on a journey to seek answers and closure and ends up finding love at the end. And it's a beautiful story. I highly recommend. And the last book for June, we finally made it, is The Art Fiasco, A Poppy Denby Investigates. So this is the second to last one before there aren't any more for the time being. And I gave this one 3 stars. The story for this book is just so-so. I got into it in the beginning, but by the middle end, I started to get bored and not as invested in the characters as much. However, I was interested in the new love interest for Poppy and her and her friends' adventures trying to solve this murder mystery. I did like the ending. It left a little bit of a cliffhanger, so I will definitely keep reading the series, which I would keep reading the series regardless. I really enjoy the writing, and I am so invested in these characters. All right, friends, that is the entire list of books I read in Q2 of 2024. There was a lot of books, and a lot of them were shorter stories, so I think that's why I got through
a lot more. However, even though I read a lot this quarter, I actually slowed down. I intentionally said one audiobook, one physical book. That's all I can handle after the Wives and Daughters and Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, because that really did kind of put me in a slump. So I was like, I'm going to keep it simple. And I did enjoy books I read after that period. And I know I didn't show you my new bullet journal in this video. I think I will save that for Q3, since all of the books for the remaining for the rest of the year will be in that bullet journal. So I'll save that for next time. Please let me know what your favorite book is, or favorite books that you read in Q2 down in the comments below. And I will see you in my next video. I hope you take care. Have a great rest of your summer, and I'll see you in the next one.